Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Liam the Prove It Guy, author of Limitation Is A Mirage. In this podcast, I will be sharing with you actionable tips, routines and insights that I have gathered over 20 years of extensive study with masters, experts and world-class performers. My hope with this podcast is to save you time, money and frustration, helping you fast-track your way to mastery. Hey, it's Liam the Prove It Guy, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Limitation Is A Mirage podcast. I plan to give out an episode every Sunday where I interview one of my mentors or coaches or just someone that I find really interesting. My mission is to learn as much as I can from these people and then pass that on to you. So thanks for tuning in. This episode is going to be Micheal Colhoun. So he's been working on a new project, pivoting his business online because of the COVID happening. And he's actually developed a platform called the Academy for Lifelong Learning. This is a platform that I'm a part of as well, so you will have seen me talk about it in different episodes. But on this episode, we talk about where he came from whenever he was growing up, what sort of lifestyle he had, the different directions that his life took him on, and how he got to where he is now, and what he wants to do with the world around him, and how he wants to interact with the people that he coaches. I find it fascinating to speak with Micheal because he's doing what I've done. He's just doing it for a lot longer than I've done it. And he's done it from a completely different direction than I have. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions for us, feel free to post them. And I will speak to you on the next video. So welcome to the Limitation Is A Mirage podcast. Thank you very much, Micheal, for jumping on board. Will you give everyone an insight into who you are?
Okay, thanks for inviting me, Liam. So my name is Micheal Colhoun, and I'm the founder of Transform People Academy, which is an accelerated learning school for coaches who want to become world-class coaches. And a very short bit of my background. I've also worked in IT for the last 20 years and spent a lot of time immersing myself in technology. I love technology. And now I've brought both of those together because we built a new platform from coaches and consultants called the Academy for Lifelong Learning, which gives coaches and consultants an opportunity to leverage the technology experience I have to build their products and courses and their services to the world. So that's me in a nutshell.
Just a nice point is that I am part of the Academy for Lifelong Learning, and I love the fact that you know all the technical stuff that I hate learning and mostly don't understand what you're saying when you talk to me about it. But that's why I think one of the reasons that makes this platform awesome for me as a coach coming in, that I don't need to learn all of the things that you know. So one of the things I like to ask people, just to give a deeper insight into who we're speaking to, because like we've known each other now for about a year now, but we've chatted quite a bit in that time, so I've got to know each other quite well. But just so the listeners get to know who you are as well, one of the questions I ask people is, could you tell me something that your parents used to do from whenever you were around the age 5 to 10 that would sort of typify your experience?
Okay, good question. So I think one of my fondest memories growing up as a small kid was I was always really, really curious. And I think that's one of the things that had always stood to me. So much so that I ended up getting electrocuted 3 times, would you believe, between 5 and 10. Now I think of it. Because what I would do is I was always trying to, when things like, pieces of electronics got broken, I'd take bits out of them, take batteries out, take wires out and try to wire things up. And I remember messing around with electronics and trying to fix broken trucks and broken, let's say, fire brigade engines and things like that. And then I moved on to fixing bulbs and lights and Christmas trees. And then I moved on to electrical powered Christmas trees. And one of the things I found in my granny's house was this old box of Christmas trees that was 220 volts. And I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Of course, there's a loose connection somewhere. But one case, one of the little covers came off, and as I was trying to get the wires in, I touched the metal cover and bang, the fuse blew. I get thrown back about 6 inches from where I was sitting. My hair started standing out like I was, like static energy. I was thinking, what the hell happened there? But it didn't stop me, and so I didn't kill myself. I'm still here to tell the story. But it kind of, I suppose, exemplifies the fact that I was always looking at how do things work? What's going on inside? How do things actually work inside? And that of course, ended up in a fascination with technology and computers. And as I got older, then, taking computers apart, building computers, literally soldering the wires and building computers. So massive fascination with personal development, but that actually came from a massive interest in technology and just being really curious about how things work. And then, of course, that moved on to how do people work. So that was one thing that I remember. The other thing that I think is a very big influence was my grandparents, because my grandmother on my father's side she was the principal of the national school. Luckily, she only taught me for 1 year, okay, but she was very strict. And my grandfather on my father's side was a retired sergeant in the Guards, Garda Síochána down in Galway, which means he was also very strict. So they were, I suppose, great hero figures, or people that I looked up to, mostly out of admiration for their lifestyle and how they lived their life and how organised they were and how structured they were. And I suppose a little bit of that rubbed off me in aspiring to be more like them in some ways, while still, having a more flexible lifestyle from actually having parents that my mum was a nurse, but she was a full stay-at-home mom, and my dad, we had a small corner store, so he spent most of his time actually working in a corner store. So we had a lot of freedom around, I suppose, getting access to sweets in the shop as a kid. So a very sort of interesting perspective, I think, in that my parents were a very big influence on academia and education and discipline and practice and repetition. And then my parents were very much into education as well, of course, but also about fun and music and creativity and art and poetry and music and things like that. So that's one of the things I have.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we've talked about this often, is that you came from a very educational background and I came from very little education, and we sort of ended up in the same path. But it's fun just to hear your story, because we never really chatted about your youth. And the fact that you're doing the same stupid stuff I was doing, you're getting electrocuted, playing with things around you, and I was doing other things that I'll not talk about. So when it now kind of makes sense why, whenever I meet a lot of coaches that want to coach people, but they're very much surface coachers. They see what's on the surface and they ask a couple questions, but because you're used to delving in and taking computers apart, you've just taken that knowledge and that understanding that, like, we are like a computer, our brain's like a computer, and if you go in deeper, you'll find out more. So when it came to a computer, for example, I would know how to turn it on and off and maybe rip it open. I definitely could take it apart, putting it back together, it's not going to happen. But you've used your understanding of that to work with people. From what I gather, that whenever you work with people now, you know not that there's more below the surface, and then there's a wee bit, and there's wee wires that might need soldered and things tidied up. So do you think that's something that has really progressed the way you coach people, is your understanding of basically how things work?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I've always found myself doing is I always found myself really immersing myself in what I did, like really going deep into what I did and just getting lost in a different world where time disappears and like hours and hours would go, forget to eat lunch and stuff like that. And that started, of course, with just being massively curious about everything, like massively curious about how the world worked, how everything worked. And then that became an academic career as I got into science and then into physics, and I did a degree in physics and got first class honours in applied physics, and that became a whole area of academic research into astronomy and astronomical instrumentation, which is a big word for saying tech for looking at stars. And that whole area was very much academically focused, but always the underlying pattern was I would really immerse myself in what I did and really try to understand everything I could, right down into the nuts and bolts, and then into understanding the complete, like the big sort of high level strategy. And then, I found the same thing in personal development. When I started to get into personal development, I got very deep into it for the same reason, because like you say, a lot of people, they kind of go surface, they go into the surface structure of what's happening, but when you go deep, you find out what really makes things work. And people are no different to computers in that way. I'm not saying they're the same, but there is a lot more complexity below the surface in computers, and there's a lot more complexity below the surface of people as well. So that had a massive impact on me, in that I suppose when I get into something, I really want to master it. I really want to understand how it works, and what really is the kind of the driving force. What's the fundamental things you need to understand to make it work? Which is probably why I got into physics as well. Physics is all about understanding the fundamental laws of nature, the fundamental laws that drive the universe. And I think there are fundamental laws that determine how people behave as well. In fact, my book, The Pillars of Transformation, is about those fundamental laws. So when you start to understand the fundamental laws that drive behavior, then it really tells you a lot about why people do what they do, and why people don't do what they want to do, and why there's kind of a disconnect there for a lot of people. But
you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, you mentioned your book there, and your description of the book there now, is that why you think it's the foundation for everyone you work with? It's one of the directions that when we first met, it was one of the first things you talked to me about, because you need the foundation. One of the things I really like about interacting with you when we talk about coaching, and you've said it a few times, that people are you keep talking about people, whereas most people coach everyone. Everyone's like this, and if I do this, that will fix everyone, or everyone needs to go here. Whereas you work with people the same as I see it, everyone that comes to me as their own individual. So I know there's a foundation that there's a lot of things that everyone can benefit from. But then again, just like we were saying about the computers, there's a point where you have to go deep with that actual person. And when you work one-to-one with a person, you should be working with them and not as an entire group. So can you give a wee brief? I've read your book, and it's an amazing book, and I understand because we've talked so much about it. But for someone, I've just realized I pointed as well because the book's just directly behind you, and I'm pointing at it as I talk to you.
Yes.
Just open the... Yeah. Do you want to give a brief reason why you think it should be the fundamental part of the training for people?
Here's one thing I did discover in terms of teaching people. I used to lecture in the university, and I now lecture and I teach online, in-person develop, and I suppose I help people with tech as well. When you're lecturing, or when you're teaching somebody something, it's very easy to spend a long time teaching a concept. It's very easy to just keep talking. It's a lot more difficult to try to be quite concise about an idea. So when I'm working with people, what I learned, and I didn't come up with the pillars of transformation. I discovered them as these were fundamentals that were in most of the old teachings about how the mind works and how people work. So when I looked at, what I did is I just put unique names on them, right? And then I explain them my own way. I felt that these four fundamental laws, these principles, were being lost, and people were using lots of fancy techniques and fancy tools to try to explain why people do what they do. And what I found is that when you look at any sort of incongruence that people have, any sort of problem that people have in their life, any sort of pain they're experiencing, it always comes down to one of four fundamental laws that they're violating. So there's one of four rules that they're breaking. And when they break those rules in themselves, without knowing it, it's going to create pain. Okay. So I didn't want to write a big book about this because, anybody who goes to any of my trainings, you'll hear me talk about this as the very, very first part. I always talk about these four fundamental laws. But I wanted to make something that was like something you could carry on in your pocket, like a reference that you could just dip into. Because what I find is when my students read the book, they say, okay, that's cool, that's interesting, it makes sense to me. But then a year goes past and they have different experiences. They understand coaching at a deeper level. And then they come back and read the book again. They get a whole different message because they see it at a deeper level now. So these ideas, they're universal ideas, but it's so easy to miss these ideas because of the shiny effect of chasing down different, this is what I'm looking for, or this is what I'm looking for. And we're looking for answers outside to how to change our lives. And of course, the answers are always inside. And that's really what the emphasis of the book is about, is saying, okay, there's four things you look at. And if you look at those, the answers are there. Now, I'm not saying people can just read the book and change their life. They should be able to, but quite often what happens is people miss the points because they're skimming over the book, or they're skimming over these principles. And that's why having conversations with people afterward becomes really valuable, because then you can relate the concepts to their life experiences. Now, to give you an example of where the book came from, is that I've been doing professional breakthrough coaching for about 15 years, 17 years now, since about 2003. And what I do is I would sit down with someone who've got a particular conflict. They've got anxiety, they've got stress, they've got PTSD, they've got health problems, they've got backache. There's something going on in their life that creates either mental, emotional, physical, or financial pain in their life. It's pain, effectively. And then I would sit down with them, understand where they're at and what's going on in their world. Okay? And then I find out where they actually want to get to. What's the ideal world they'd like to live in? And find out there's a gap between them. You know, this is where they are right now, but they want to be somewhere else. Okay? And then I look at, you know, what's the fundamental beliefs that they have about the world? What's the fundamental ideas they have that they follow as their rules? And some of those rules will be, I won't say wrong, but they're not useful to them. Okay? Like, let me give you an example. You know, some people who've lived through tough times will say something like, you know, if you mind the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. And that's really useful belief to have if you don't have a lot of money. Yeah. But if you're actually penny pinching when you're trying to grow a business, you will end up not having any time left because you won't spend money to leverage your time. So that's a bad belief to have if you want to scale your business. Penny pinching. You have to invest in your people, you have to invest in technology, you have to invest in systems. So that's an example of a belief that might be very good if you don't have a lot of money, but if you actually have some money and you want to bring more money into your life, then having that belief is not useful. So what I would do is I'd find these beliefs, and then before we actually do any change work, I would sit down with my client, whoever I'm working with, and I'd explain to them a whole set of new beliefs that they could adopt if they wanted to. And these beliefs include the 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars would be the first things I'd explain, and then I'd explain other fundamental beliefs that successful people have. Right? And when people follow these successful rules, they tend to get much better results. So after 15 years of doing professional breakthrough coaching with people and helping people to change the direction of their life and to raise the bar, to set more clear goals with more ambition and feel more motivated, then I got it's not that I got sick of it, but I got tired of saying the same chapter over and over again at the start of these sessions. So I said, why don't I just record this as a kind of a pre-session homework? So when somebody does a breakthrough with me, I can give them this content to read, and then they can go through that, and then I can save some time on that process, and then go straight into giving examples of how this affects their life. So now when I work with people, the first thing since the book is out about 3 years, now when I work with people, the first thing I'll do, I'll actually give them a copy of the book. So read that first before we begin, and then we'll go straight into understanding how that relates to your life. Then, of course, the book became an audio, it became a video, and now it's becoming one of the fundamental trainings that every single one of our students do before they actually start learning the actual coach training or personal development training or setting goals or anything else. They always do the pillars of transformation first. So that's where it came from. So it really was just a way of trying to simplify a model where people could refer back to, and they can carry it around with them and use it as a tool to understand how to get better results in their life.
Yeah, I love that idea of you're sort of giving them pre-homework. So rather than people coming to you with their beliefs still fully 100% intact, whenever they read your book, it's already it's hard to read your book and not challenge your thinking. Like, I know I came to you with a few different questions after reading the book, because there was things I didn't know that I was thinking. It was just, again, because of the way I grew up, I still saw myself as someone that couldn't be educated. I had to be self-educated. I had to read my own books and do that. And then I realized when we talked and after reading the book that I've learned from loads of mentors, and that is a version of educated. I just wasn't designed for school education. And I love the fact that when people come to you, they're already thinking about what could be different. So if they were the penny pincher, they're thinking, maybe I don't need to look after my pennies anymore. Maybe that was when I was younger. Now I have a job that pays me a check every month, so I don't need to have that fundamental core belief, and I can move forward. So they're already coming to you ready to make a change, or as you put it, ready for a breakthrough. And that was the second point I wanted to say, that I love that whenever you're coaching people, you're not just trying to improve what they're doing or improve their life. You're trying to make them have a breakthrough. So, like, again, we had this whenever you started teaching me about technology, because again, I thought I knew enough about it just to get by, but I wouldn't look after a website or anything like that. And then I had a breakthrough after, I think it was a 4-hour session with yourself, that I already know a lot of this, and if I made a wee bit more effort, I can know so much more. So the fact that people are coming to you, not only knowing that they can change and ready to change, but your goal isn't just to help them improve, but it's to make an actual, like, a breakthrough. To me is much, it's, even when you say breakthrough instead of coaching, if you come for a coaching session or a breakthrough session, like, I want the breakthrough. I want to up my level or break my glass ceiling, or whatever way you want to word it. So whenever you're taking on a client, I assume then you don't just take everyone. Like, there's a process people have to go through to see if you can work with them and if they can work with you, rather than just taking anyone.
I
Can
think
you
it's a very
explain
good
that a
point.
little?
Yeah. One thing I think you need to be very careful, especially if you're starting a career as a coach or a therapist or anybody who works with people, is that there can be a tendency to want to agree with people. You like people like to be liked, and when you like to be liked, you tend to agree with what people say. And when you look at breakthrough coaching, which is very different to accountability coaching or any other form of coaching, breakthrough coaching, what you're saying up front is like, I'm going to show you certain things, and I'm going to show you certain ideas, and I'm going to show you certain principles and concepts, and I know you're not going to agree with me, and that's what I want to know. I want to know what you don't agree with me. Because if you don't agree with me, that could be where the answer lies. That could be why you're not getting the success that you want. Because I'm not giving you my opinion here. I'm setting down a set of guiding principles that have evolved over hundreds, if not thousands of years, that create success. So if any of the principles I talk about, if any of the concepts I talk about, you don't agree with them, we need to look at that, because that's probably where you're creating an incongruence or a conflict or a problem in your life that stops you getting the results you actually want. So the breakthrough process really is about, it's not really breaking through, it's breaking down some of your fundamental foundational beliefs that probably served you at one stage, but probably don't serve you anymore. So if we can find those fundamental foundational beliefs and we can break those beliefs and rebuild them with new, more empowering beliefs, then that can change your life. And it can be something really simple. It could be something as simple as I'm no good at technology. If somebody had a belief that I'm no good at technology, even if they use technology a lot, every time something goes wrong, they'd probably say inside their head, oh, I'm no good at technology. That's why it doesn't work. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you just put one word at the end of that sentence, it totally changes your perspective. So if somebody says, I'm no good at technology yet, that means they just haven't figured it out yet. And that one word can make the difference between someone giving up and not wanting to do it because they know they're no good at technology, versus somebody who can actually learn how to use a technology because they just haven't gotten there yet. And that's an example of something small can make a big difference. Now that's not what I'm talking, that's not the level of change I'm talking about in a breakthrough, but it's an example of the type of things where one word or a different perspective can really change how people self-motivate. And for me, a lot of what we do is about understanding self-motivation, you know?
Yeah, you're also cutting out any defensiveness against me and you as two people in a room, because you're not saying this is my opinion, you need to change this fundament. You're saying these are just principles. And again, the way you talk, if you didn't explain at the start that you've come from a scientific background, it would be strange to see how you got to this conclusion. But again, because you see everything as laws, and if I come to you and you say to me, I don't think you should be doing X, Y, and Z, I can then argue with you, that's your opinion, and I don't agree with you. But if you say that the laws of physics are this, and you're trying to go against them, well, I can't really argue then. So I have to change, or I have to question it.
Yeah.
So there's something to fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna move on to because now you've pivoted and went online. Do you notice a difference now coaching people now that we're not able to be in a room with people for the last like 3 months?
Yeah.
How has that changed your approach, or is it the same, or how did you pivot?
That's a really great question. It's actually been a lot more different than I expected. I mean, we had already been using a lot of technology to support our trainings anyways, with home studying video and audio and stuff like that. So that wasn't new to us. And I'd already been doing coaching over Zoom for years as well. So that wasn't new to me either. But actually changing from being an academy where people meet in the room to actually doing a fully online academy, I had to change a lot of my thinking about how we transfer knowledge. And it surprised me actually how different it actually is. It's like one of the things we talk about is a lot of people watch webinars. Webinars are really popular nowadays. And the problem with a webinar is a one-way broadcast. So yes, people can put something in the chat, but if most webinar hosts or most webinar presenters are like me, what you tend to do is you don't watch the text box when you're speaking because you're in flow. And you're giving a set piece presentation on a certain concept or a certain topic. And then afterwards you might look at some of the questions. But the questions, if people do ask questions, normally you would have somebody else answering the questions, not the presenter, while the person's speaking, because if you have to read and stop and talk, then you lose the flow. It doesn't come across very well. So when I looked at doing this, first of all, I knew I had to change how we're going to teach people how to become coaches or how to become therapists or how to improve, ask better questions. But the question is, how do we actually transfer that knowledge without being in a classroom where you can read the room? And I didn't want to use a webinar style. So again, using my background in technology, one of the things I realized is super important when you're interacting with people face to face over a digital platform, is the little nuances and the little sort of tells and the little sort of interactions that people have while you're speaking to them. So it's really important that you can see people when you're teaching online, and that you can see enough of them, enough of their physical form, that you can get tells from how you're communicating. And that's why we use this classroom type environment where when I teach a piece of content, what we do is we turn off webcams and we mute all the mics, and then I teach a piece of content, and then we go straight into a discussion session where each person asks questions about that piece of content, but we're also reading the whole room as well, and there's a little bit of a debate that starts, a little bit of conversation that starts, because in that way you're starting to get more intuitive feel for where people are at and whether they're getting the content or whether you're transferring enough information or whether you need to slow down or speed up and make sure that everybody's actually moving forward with you. Now, which means is it takes longer to teach people something online than you would in the classroom. But because you don't have to leave your home, you don't have to do like a 6, 8, 10 hour day. Normally when I'm teaching in a training room, we do like a 10-hour day. It's typically a 10-hour day, and they're intense, immersive days. And now what we do, and that might be just like 4 days together or 7 days together. Now what we're doing is doing more frequent, shorter stints, shorter deep dives. So like little immersions. So what we might do is 1.5 to 3 hour, typically immersions every week, where the first part is content and the second part is we're really getting into experiencing through breakout exercises, to people working one-on-one together. I'm listening, or they're actually writing notes, they're doing exercise themselves, and then we actually feed back content afterwards. So instead of having like a 10-hour day for 4 days straight, now we're looking at like 12 weeks where we do 1.5 to 3 hours every week. So it's a longer duration, but it's deeper in shorter bursts, if that makes sense. Which means people are coming along a much longer journey for 12 weeks rather than coming on just going to deep dive for 4 days. And I'm thinking it's actually working better because you don't have a lot of the commute times, you don't have to book into hotels, you don't have to do a lot of the stuff that we had to do before, so we can just sit down and start when we start and just get straight into content and content creation and exercise and feedback and Q&A. So it's a very, very different way of teaching. And I'm actually really enjoying it now because of course it also means that after 3 hours or whatever it is, then I'm finished, and I can spend time with my family. I can go for a walk, and it's given me a better quality of life as well. So I'm actually quite enjoying this new pivot that we're doing, that we're going through, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for coaches today, anybody who works with people, to find the right technology, the right tools, and the right systems, the right process, so it fits in with your lifestyle as much it fits in with your client's lifestyle as well. So I think I'm really excited about what's happening, to be quite honest.
Yeah, for the client, even those 4 intensive days. I know as a speaker and a trainer, whenever I'm going to do intensive training, I prep all week, and I get my energy levels, I feel right. But some of the students are coming in from work. They've worked all week doing a 9 to 5, and then they're 10 hours, 3 days, just overwhelms them. Whereas this system now, you've got your 3 hours, and then you've a week to think about it, and you can drop questions in, and you can ask the other coaches or the other people involved. And one of the other things you talked about was the breakout rooms. Whenever you do a breakout room in real life, when there's people there, you're still in the room with the person if you're watching. So you're there, but you're not supposed to be there. They're supposed to ignore you, but it's really hard to ignore. Like, I know from years of martial arts, when the master said, you go over there and do your form, just ignore me, 90% of your brain's like, he has got eyes everywhere, he is watching. So now when you do the breakout room and you're there, but you're physically not, you easily forget that you're there, and you get involved with your client, and you do what's going on. The back and forth happens as if it's just you and them, and then the feedback is incredible, because you personally are getting to see what I'm like as a coach, and what I'm like interacting, without me worrying about you being there, because I forgot you're there. And then for me, the feedback then is invaluable. And that's what we talked about whenever you first mentioned about coming up with the idea for the platform with the courses, because like everyone who's watching this and everyone in general, we've all done courses, and you take your notes and then nothing happens because you've no way of contacting the coach and asking for feedback. So this way, whenever you're actually getting involved in doing, I knew it was going to be a strange transition to go all online. I was the same as yourself. I'd been doing some online, but the fact that now it's almost like I'm there. And then like you said, even for the clients and the students, once it's over, they're at home. They don't have to, they can sit at home, and you can think about, right, what was that course about, or what was that session about? You don't have to think, right, I have an hour and a half drive down the road, and then I need to sort out my dinner, and then I'll sit and think about what's going on. So I think what you did is incredible, and I think it's just completely opened up the space for everyone. So that sort of leads me to my next question, because you have done, if we just talked about this and we didn't talk about your failures, you would think he's just a super tech wizard, and he created all this stuff, and it was amazing, and now here we are. And a word that we've used a lot jokingly is just. You just created this, and you just did that, and just did this. So what is a failure, or an apparent failure that happened to you, that, like, when you look back at it now, it was actually a really good thing to happen in your life?
Okay. So first of all, I think what I'd say is that one of the things that I think is important is to never have regrets in life, right? I think this is super important, and I think a lot of people do have regrets because they don't do what they actually want to do. And before I go deep into this, I just want to look at what's happening in the world today. Is that for the first time in probably 100 years, certainly 50 years, everybody's had to literally stop everything they're doing, and they've really had to question what they're doing, either because they're furloughed, or maybe some people have lost a job, or they've lost 80% of their business overnight, or maybe they've lost the business totally. So there's been a lot of painful points around, if you want to call it failure, that isn't necessarily failure. It's really an opportunity to see what else can be done. Okay. So that said, I think what's key, I failed more than most people, but a lot of people don't get to see my failures. And I think a great way of looking at it is about thinking about playing a game, right? If you're playing a game of snakes and ladders, or you're playing Monopoly or some game like that. And when it comes to your turn, you take the dice and you roll the dice. Okay? And if you see failure as rolling a very low number on a dice, then everybody fails, because you can't determine the luck of the draw when you roll the dice. You could get double sixes, you could get a 1 and a 2. So the key thing that determines your success isn't whether you got a double six, it's how many times you roll the dice. So the more times you roll the dice, the more likely you're going to get a double six. And when you get a double six, you get a win, then you shout, "Hey guys, look what I did." And that's what people remember. People remember the successes you have, and then they say things like, "Oh, he was so lucky." Right? He was so lucky because isn't he doing great? Or isn't she doing great? And the reality is that I personally don't believe in luck. Yeah, luck plays a part of it, but luck only changes the numbers on the face of the die. Mm-hmm. But there's so much more that is determined, that determines how you live your life, which is about how many times you roll the dice, how many turns. Like a lot of people will get the dice and say, "Oh, not for me," and they'll pass the dice to somebody else and let somebody else take a turn, and they miss turns, and they wait and they procrastinate. And I mean, I've got so many failures in my life that I think one of the big failures, if you want to call it a failure, is that I was brought up to say yes. I was brought up to help people, to serve people. And one of the areas I got caught very badly in this is when I was lecturing at university. So I went straight from college to being a postgrad to lecturing at university. This was my first real job, I guess. So I was a very naive, very young lecturer at the university. And at the same time, the university was expanding and I was working in the IT department, and the IT department didn't have a lot of staff. So I volunteered, I said yes, to help get the system set up, the technologies. So we're setting up networks and printers and new network suites. And I was basically setting up all of this up myself, and I didn't really have a lot of help. So I ended up working from 11 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock of the night, every night, literally 6 days a week. I've come in the weekends as well, because I didn't really realize there was a word called no in the English language. And I tried to figure it out myself. And of course, doing this for long enough, you'll get burnt out, you'll get exhausted. And I remember I literally quit. I was 2 years lecturing at university, and I walked into my boss's office and say, "I can't do this anymore. I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted." I remember one of the pivotal points for me was we used to give 2-hour lectures. So a 2-hour lecture is a lot of preparation. It takes maybe about 10 hours, 15 hours of prep to deliver a 2-hour lecture in the university. So that was one job I was doing. The other job I was doing was setting up all these computers. So I spent a lot of time getting ready for these lectures, delivering the lecture, and going back. And then, there's a queue of people outside my door who want to get their passwords reset, their printer is broken, their account, they can't get access. I have to fix all these as well. And I was exhausted. I was literally burnt out. And I remember one particular day I delivered a 2-hour lecture, and I was so on edge, and I was so uptight, and I was so stressed that I delivered the complete 2-hour lecture in 45 minutes. And I got to the end of the 45 minutes and turned over my slides. We had transparencies back then, so you put these transparencies on these overhead projector. Yeah. And I turned over the page and realized it was my last transparency, and I had nothing else to talk about. So I just looked up at the class in shock and kind of said, "Okay guys, and that's it for today." And they all looked at me, and 45 minutes into our lecture, and I left and went back to my office, and I just broke down. And I broke down just because I felt I'd failed. I felt the whole world had caved in on me. I wasn't able to deliver what I wanted to deliver. I wasn't able to get everything done. But of course, I never asked for help. I never said to anybody else, "I can't do this." I never said no. I never said I can't do the technology and the lecturing. And that ended in me walking to Jerry's office and saying, "Look, I quit. I can't do this. I'm going to leave." So for a lot of people I knew, they thought I was crazy. Like quitting a job, I was like a contract lecturer for 2 years. If I stayed another 3 months, I probably would have been made a permanent member of staff and probably would have a job for life. But instead, because of my projections, I left. And that became a whole journey into .com boom, building my own IT business, and then getting into burnout again, and then discovering personal development. And all of that became, a whole sequence of events which has landed me up today. So I don't regret anything, But I think, especially in times like that, so many people feeling anxiety and stress about failures, so-called failures. They're not failures. They're just things that create stress in our body because we don't understand it, or it's not comfortable for us. It's new territory. No one has been down this road before. No one's really had an opportunity to be in a lockdown scenario, not for a long time, at least for probably 50 years. So we have to figure out how we actually get our mindset clear, how we get our focus clear, how we embrace the opportunities around us so we can figure out a new way to live our lives.
Yeah, I love the idea of feeling. I always say to people, feel forward. And I think that comes from being a martial artist. And you feel on a daily there, like say if you're sparring and you're getting punched in the head, that's a feel. But you have to quickly learn from that failure or you'll just get punched in the head again. Whereas most people feel and then they just think, well, that's it. I'm just no good at that, so I'm just not going to do that. Whereas if you know that every failure has a lesson somewhere in it, even if you don't want to be too deep or spiritual or anything, you just think there's a lesson there. There's something you are not capable of doing. You might be able to learn how to do that, or you might know that it's not for you and then learn what is for you instead. So like whenever you were saying there that if you had stayed 3 months and became a full-time lecturer, my personality just immediately thinks, oh, that would have been shit. Like, imagine that's what you did for the last 13 years instead of doing what you're doing now. Not only what the world would have missed out on, but what you personally would have missed out on. So all your coaches, the people that you've coached, everything that they would have missed out on. But to the regular person or the normal, whatever that is, person, they would think you're just about to be offered a life job forever. You should take, no matter what, you should just take that. It's safe and you can be in that little confined box and stay there and be safe. And to me, like whenever you say that to me, my body just reacts. Like it just doesn't. I just don't want that.
Yeah, I think we're similar in that way that we like to do things differently than most people. And again, I think that's another attribute that I think is very important in my life is being different to other people. For some people, having a permanent job working in the university is like just nirvana. And they there's friends of mine who were working with me back like nearly 17 years ago, 18 years ago, 20 years ago, is it? And they're still there and they're still doing the same job and they're still in the same department, the same office, and they love it. And they absolutely love it because they've found their niche doing what they love. But for me, one of the things that I think is really defines part of my identity is that I see things differently. I've always seen things different. I always want to be different. And I think when you've spent your whole life doing things differently, when something like this happens, this pandemic, the moment that we're in, it's almost like it's just another day. It's just another day at school, learning how to cope with doing things differently, because that's what I've been doing my whole life.
Hated school.
Whereas a lot of people would be the opposite of me, people who like their predictability, like their security, like knowing what's going to happen, it's difficult because if you're not used to being out of your comfort zone, you don't have a comfort zone anymore, and it feels very alien, it feels very scary. But really it's about understanding that it's just a new chapter. This is the end of a chapter, and sort of the commercial break between this chapter and the next chapter is going to go on much longer than we thought.
I believe a comfort zone's fine if you're comfortable in it. So like you said, you have friends that still work in the job they're in and they love it, and that's fine. I believe a comfort zone is fine if you're comfortable in it, but most people aren't. I think it's funny too that we had the same experience, but on the complete other end of the spectrum.
Right.
You were in what people would consider a flashy job and like was for life. I was a barman, and I had the same. People reacted the exact same way when I said, "Right, that's it. I'm leaving. I'm quitting my job and I'm starting my own business." So it doesn't matter what the job is. It could be the most fantastical job in the world, or it could be a very low-paying job, but it's consistent. People don't care. They just think if you're in a pattern that seems to be kind of working, you should just stay there and not move on. So that sort of leads me again now to this question, which is, if you could wave a magic wand, what would be your ideal outcome for your clients, for your people that watch your videos, people watching this interview, everything?
Okay. Great questions. So if I had a magic wand, what would I want to see happening? I think one of the core things that we teach in our academy, it's not that I think it, this is one of the core things we teach in our academy, is how to realize potential. And a big shift in my mindset was realizing when I started on this journey of personal development, I thought I kind of sussed out most of the world. My background was in physics. I understand like the laws of the universe. I understand technology. I understand academia. I understood business. I grew up with a business background. I thought I figured it all out. Except for this one thing called stress. I figured everything out except for this one thing I called stress. And what I've learned is that, you know, if people are doing something that they love, right, it's not stress. It's pressure maybe, but it's not stress. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing the exact same job and you hate it, your life is miserable, right? So if I had a magic wand, it would be to raise the bar on what you think you can achieve, so you can realize more of that amazing potential that you have. You know, I really think that everybody's got the ability to be amazing. Everybody's got the ability to be fantastic, to be successful at the thing that they want to do, the thing that they love doing, the thing that they enjoy doing. And yes, you could get a job working as a lecturer in a university and get a nice pension and all the rest of it. But would you enjoy it? Because if you don't enjoy it, there's no point in doing it. It's like the difference between, somebody said once, I don't know who said it, that, you know, a paid army will never fight as much as a revolutionary. And the difference is that if you're doing something for a job, you're doing it for the money really, so you can buy freedom. But if you're doing something because it gives you freedom, then you're not working at all. And again, now is a really great time to think about doing what you really love. Because if you're doing what you hate, your life is, you're going to get old very quick. And you're going to be in constant stress. And wouldn't you prefer to be, you know, questioning, can I really do this? Is there something else? Is there something else that could help me to get more out of life, to realize more of my potential, to take a different strategy, different pathway, a different way that would allow me to live in that space of what I call flow. Live in that space where you love doing what you're doing, time disappears, and it's just a joy to do what you do, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that idea of people's potential and pushing towards it. And you've talked about flow a few times, and I know there's going to be people watching this that have never experienced flow or flow state. And if you haven't, it's probably because you're not doing something that you really love or that you're really passionate about. So go out and find that thing. That's why I always tell people, try everything. You could be I used to say it when I was at school. I wasn't great at school, but I used to always say to my teacher, I could be the greatest horse rider that's ever lived in the history of the world if someone would just buy me a horse. So try everything once. You never know what you're going to be amazing at. So I have one more question that is just for my own interest and personal interest, but it fits with a potential one. So it kind of sounds like it fits in the whole conversation. So my question is, if you had a superpower or were a superhero, what would your superpower be, or who would you be?
Wow, I've been asked that question. If I had a superpower, what would my superpower be? I think it's just persistence. Is I never give up. I think it's such a simple thing that it's so easy to follow down a path and think you're getting there and then just give up just before you get there. And we all have opportunities that go dead, that just they don't work out. Even in my own business today, we were just about to launch a new product on the 18th of March, and then we locked down everything on the 17th of March. And rather than seeing that as a failure or a lost opportunity, I see it as just a chance to just keep moving forwards. So I think if I had a superpower, if there was something that was different, it was my really stubborn persistence to keep pushing forward, just to keep going, maybe take a break, maybe go off on a different tangent and come back again, but to do what you feel is really brings life to your journey, that lights up your journey. Sometimes, I mean, there's no straight route to any goal, but if something that you really want to do and the world needs it, then do it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, as all our conversations. So I assume I will get you back on. But just before we leave, where can everyone find you? Where's the best place to look for you?
The easiest way to find me nowadays is find me on the Academy 4 platform. So that's www.4, spelled out FOUR.academy. So FOUR.academy. There's no .com or anything like that at the end. So 4.academy, and you'll see all about me there, and you'll see what we're doing, how we're actually transforming people, coaching programs all now onto this platform, and other amazing other instructors and like yourself who are also using this platform as well. So that's the place to find me. And I'm all over social media as well. So if you just search for Micheal Colhoun, you'll find me in social media all over the place as well.
I will link everything up as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, thank you.